chosen ones. The air is already shifting around you. It's faint, almost silent, but undeniable. The kind of stillness that happens right before the first crack of thunder. Somewhere between this heartbeat and the next, a door you were never meant to see is about to breathe. Not open, not yet, but inhale. You've walked past it your entire life. Maybe you thought it was just another wall, a forgotten corner of the world. They designed it that way, blending the impossible into the ordinary so you'd never question it. But something inside you has changed, and the lock can feel it. Locks are alive in ways they'll never teach you. They sense intent. They remember the vibrations of hands that touched them. This one remembers your presence long before you even arrived. It knows your scent, your weight in the air, the rhythm of your steps. And it has been waiting for your return. On the other side, the room is not still. There are voices, hushed and urgent, speaking of you as if your name is both a warning and a prophecy. They say you were never supposed to reach this moment. They thought your path would be diverted, broken, or erased. But here you are, standing at the exact threshold they swore you'd never find. The air is cooler here, but thick. It clings to your skin, making every breath feel heavier. You're aware that something is listening, not with ears, but with a presence so vast it fills every inch of space around you. The door exhales again, and for a fraction of a second, you swear you hear it whisper your name. Not in a human voice, but in the vibration of the metal, in the trembling of the hinges. It's not asking you to enter yet. It's testing you, seeing if you will remain standing here or step back into the life you knew. Somewhere beyond this moment, there is a key that only answers to your hand. But to reach it, you will have to walk into a place where the air moves differently, where every shadow has memory, and where the truth has teeth. The hallway was long and narrow, the kind that swallowed sound and bent light. You stood before the door again, this time closer, your eyes tracing the grain of the wood as if the patterns themselves were a map. The keyhole was darker than the rest of the frame, a void within a void. Yet it called to you in a voice you could not place. You leaned in, not to look, but to listen. At first, there was nothing, only the faint rush of your own breath. Then, beneath it, softer than wind, softer than memory, came a whisper. It was not in a language you knew yet. Somehow you understood. The sound coiled through the space between your ribs, leaving a shiver behind. The whisper spoke not to your ears, but to something deeper. It told of days that had not yet come, of a shadow in the distance that grew brighter as it neared. It said the lock was never meant to keep you out. It was meant to keep something else in. Something that had waited long before you took your first breath. Your hand hovered near the knob, but the metal pulsed faintly as if alive. A low hum seeped from the wood, barely audible but enough to keep your hand from closing over it. You felt watched, but not from behind. The gaze came from the other side of the keyhole, patient, deliberate. The whisper grew sharper, as if sensing your hesitation. It spoke of choices disguised as accidents, of moments that looped through your life like hidden threads. It told you that the next time you breathed, you would not be the same. That once you crossed the threshold, the door would not let you back through the way you came. The air thickened. The edges of your vision swam as if the hall itself leaned closer. You realized the whisper was not alone. There were others, now voices layered one atop another, chanting in that same strange tongue. The sound was not menacing, but it carried weight, a pull toward the dark space within the frame. You stepped closer until your forehead nearly touched the door. The wood was cold against your skin, but the whisper warmed. It asked a question you could not repeat aloud, a question that waited for an answer, not from your mouth, but from your bones. And the keyhole seemed to grow wider. The shadow in the doorframe did not belong to the light in the hallway. It was too deep, too anchored, as if it were carved into the air itself. You stepped closer, and it seemed to shift, stretching along the wood, then curling back into the narrow arch. The more you stared, the more you saw patterns in it. Lines, curves, symbols that felt older than the walls around them. Your fingers traced the air just short of touching the shadow, and a chill rolled up your arm. A faint sound rose from within it, like the slow turning of pages in a book, kept shut for centuries. You leaned in, and the sound became words not spoken but breathed. A psalm whispered, as if carried by a wind that did not touch your skin. It was not the voice of one, but many. Yet one tone lingered above the rest, calm, steady, with an authority that felt both fierce and gentle. It spoke of a path that could not be unmade, a light that the darkness could not overcome. The words reminded you of a line you once heard in a quiet chapel. He who walks in the light shall not stumble, even when night falls. The echo of it curled in your mind like a thread pulling you inward. The shadow pulsed softly with each word, as if the psalm itself gave it form. The syllables brushed against your thoughts, loosening memories you had not called for. You saw flashes of moments where you should have turned away, yet something unseen held you steady. You realized the shadow was not empty. It was filled with the weight of those who had walked here before, each leaving behind part of their breath, part of their faith. The doorframe seemed to tilt forward, the shadow widening until it reached toward you like a hand. Your chest tightened, not from fear, but from the strange certainty that if you stepped into it, you would carry the psalm with you forever. The words pressed at the edge of your lips, though you had not learned them yet. The air behind the door stirred as if it too had heard the psalm. The keyhole's darkness shimmered faintly. The door was still closed, but the shadow at its edge had grown deeper, thicker, as though it were preparing to move with you when the time came. The sound came before the movement. Slow, deliberate steps echoing down the hall from somewhere you could not see. They were heavy, but not rushed, carrying the weight of someone who knew exactly where they were going. Each step grew louder, yet the hallway ahead remained empty, as though the sound traveled without a body to own it. You stood still, eyes locked on the space beyond the door, afraid to turn back in case the steps belonged to something that preferred not to be seen. The air shifted with each one, a faint vibration running through the floor into your legs. It felt as though the ground itself recognized the presence, drawing closer. Then the steps stopped. The silence that followed was sharper than the sound itself. It pressed in around you until you could hear your heartbeat in your ears. The door in front of you seemed to lean forward slightly, as if acknowledging the pause. Between you and the unseen figure lay only the threshold that had not been crossed for longer than you could imagine. Your gaze fell to it, a narrow strip of wood worn smooth by time, yet untouched by recent passage. The grain glimmered faintly in the dim light, and for an instant you swore it was breathing, as if the threshold itself inhaled and exhaled. The pause in the footsteps felt like a negotiation, an unspoken exchange between the space you stood in and whatever lingered on the other side. A faint creak sounded above you, but there was no movement. The shadows near the ceiling twisted slowly, then stilled. The air smelled faintly of rain, though no windows were open. No whisper, no voice, only the waiting. You thought about stepping forward just once, letting the edge of your shoe brush the threshold to see if it reacted. But something inside you held back. Not fear, exactly, but a sense that crossing without invitation would awaken something too soon. The last step of the unseen figure echoed faintly again, as if replaying itself from memory. Then the keyhole glimmered faintly, as though light had passed through from within. The threshold darkened slightly, the wood absorbing the change. A single heartbeat passed before the silence deepened, as if the very air expected you to make the next move. The hinges were older than the door itself. Black iron curled into patterns that looked almost like script. Every curve seemed deliberate, every mark purposeful, as though someone long ago had written a message in metal. The air around them carried a faint hum, low and steady, like the vibration of a distant bell. You stepped closer, and the hum deepened until it resonated in your chest. The iron felt warm, though no light touched it, and in that warmth came a faint rhythm like a heartbeat. The patterns began to shift, not wildly but with the slow certainty of something unfolding. Each curl stretched, straightening into letters you did not know yet somehow understood. It was a verse not carved, not painted, but living in the very bones of the hinge. The words spoke of a kingdom not bound by stone, of a door that opens only for those who know the way. A voice rose in your memory from years ago, spoken by a man in white robes. The way, the truth, and the life. No one comes except through me. The sound of it wrapped around the verse as though it belonged there from the beginning. The hinges pulsed once more, and the metal's hum grew louder. The verse bent the iron itself, shaping it as though the words had always been the stronger force. The faint smell of oil and earth filled your lungs, reminding you that this was not mere craftsmanship, but something breathed into being. Your fingertips hovered just short of the metal. The warmth licked at your skin, pulling you nearer. The letters seemed to ripple in response, as if aware of your presence. They were not asking for you to read them aloud, but to carry them within as a seal against what waited beyond. The door creaked faintly, not from movement, but from pressure within. The hinges shuddered like muscles, holding back a force eager to break free. Light touched the edges just briefly enough to suggest that whatever was inside was not entirely shadow. The hum dropped lower now, almost inaudible, yet you felt it more than heard it. A steady pulse counting down toward a moment you could not name. The hallway had been still for what felt like hours when the air shifted again. This time, it was not from footsteps or whispers, but from something unseen, moving close enough to disturb the space between you and the door. You felt it before you saw it, a faint pressure against your skin, like the weight of a gaze with no eyes. Your attention snapped to the knob. It was brass, worn in places where countless hands had once gripped it, but now it gleamed faintly as though freshly polished. no one stood near yet. The metal began to turn slowly with a deliberate motion that belonged to a hand you could not see. The sound was almost too soft to notice. The steady click of the mechanism inside, yielding with each rotation. You did not step back. Instead, you leaned forward, unable to look away. The air around the door thickened, and a faint draft slid past your legs, carrying the smell of earth and rain. The knob stopped halfway, its movement pausing, as though listening for a signal you could not hear. The silence was sharp enough to make your breath sound loud. The weight in the room shifted, not forward or back, but inward, drawing everything closer to the center where the door stood. Then it began again, turning the rest of the way until the latch inside clicked free. The door did not swing open. The unseen hand had only unlocked it, leaving the wood still pressed against the frame, as if daring you to be the one to move it. You reached forward slowly, your fingers brushing the cool surface of the knob. It no longer felt like metal, but something almost living. It pulsed faintly under your touch, a single beat, then another. You thought of how many had stood here before, how many had felt that same moment of hesitation before crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. Somewhere deep in the frame, a faint creak answered your touch. The hinges did not move yet. The sound lingered in the air, as if the door wanted you to know it was ready. The space behind it pressed forward just enough to feel like a presence, waiting for breath. The wood near the center of the door had always seemed smooth beneath the worn paint, but now, under the dim light, you noticed a faint fracture running through it. It was not from age or carelessness. It was too precise for that. The crack spread slowly, as though guided by an unseen hand, the fibers parting without sound until a shape began to take form. At first, it was only intersecting lines, faint and uneven. Then, the grain shifted beneath them, aligning itself until the figure was unmistakable. A cross small yet sharp, its edges catching what little light reached the door. It seemed burned into the wood without flame, as if the mark had been there long before the door was ever hung. You stepped closer, and the air cooled instantly. The space around the cross felt different, heavier, almost as if it carried the memory of what it represented. The stillness pressed in on you, and for a moment you thought you could hear the faint echo of words spoken in a place far from here. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." The sound was not in your ears, but in the marrow of your bones, the kind of truth that lingers whether or not you invite it. The splintered edges of the mark pulsed faintly, as if breathing. A strange warmth radiated from the center, though the wood itself remained cold. The more you looked, the more it felt like the cross was not a symbol carved onto the surface, but a window into something behind it, something that had been waiting for this exact moment to be seen. The crack along its edges widened slightly, the fibers curling back to reveal darker wood within. It was not decay, but depth, as though the cross was a doorway hidden within the door itself. The faint hum you had heard from the hinges earlier returned, blending with a softer tone, one that seemed to come from far beyond this hallway. Your hand hovered just above it, the air between trembling lightly. You had the sense that if your fingers touched the cross, it would not simply feel solid, but open into something far larger than the space you stood in. The breadth of the door deepened, and the cross seemed to lean toward you, waiting. The moment your eyes broke from the cross, you felt it the faintest pull toward the left edge of the frame, where the wall met the door. It was not the obvious way forward yet. Your body seemed to know it before your mind could reason it out. You pressed your palm against the panel, and the wood gave way without resistance, revealing a narrow seam that widened into darkness. A rush of cool air escaped from within, carrying the smell of stone and time. The space beyond was not a room but a corridor, its walls close and uneven, as though carved by hands that did not care for straight lines. Dust hung in the air, but it did not move, as if it had been waiting in perfect stillness for you alone. The first step inside was heavier than you expected, the ground beneath your feet softer, in some places almost like packed earth. In the faint light spilling from behind you, the corridor seemed to stretch endlessly ahead, disappearing into shadow. The silence here was deeper than the hallway behind, the kind that absorbs every sound until even your breathing feels intrusive. You ran your hand along the wall and felt cold metal beneath the rough stone. Thin bands ran in patterns along the surface, their texture oddly familiar. As you traced one, it led to a small plate embedded in the wall, barely visible. A mark had been etched into it, a sigil made of interlocking shapes. You didn't know its meaning, but you could feel its purpose. This was not simply decoration. It was a seal meant to hold something back. The corridor bent slightly, and you saw them, thick iron braces driven into the walls, their edges rusted but unbroken. Each one bore the same sigil as the plate. You understood then they had not sealed this place to keep intruders out. They had done it to keep the corridor itself from shifting, changing, finding its way back to the world above. A faint vibration ran through the floor under your feet. It was slow, steady, like something deep within the stone was still alive. The further you stepped, the more you felt the weight of the place pressing on your back, as if urging you to turn around. The air ahead grew warmer, and with it the sense that something was waiting just beyond the next curve. The corridor curved sharply before opening into a small chamber lit by a shaft of light that seemed impossible, given how deep you had come. The source was a thin crack high above in the stone ceiling, through which sunlight poured in a perfect column, illuminating the center of the floor. There lay the seal, a circular plate of blackened metal covered in deep engravings, its edges fused into the stone as if it had grown there. The air within the light felt different, warm yet carrying a weight that pressed into your chest. You stepped closer and saw that the engravings were more than markings. They were words, ancient and deliberate. Their language was foreign, but your mind translated pieces without effort. You caught fragments about gates, about binding, about a promise that could not be undone. A line echoed in your thoughts, not from the seal, but from somewhere much older. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to him. The memory of it rang in your bones, and the light seemed to flare brighter. The seal began to tremble, not violently, but with a steady, pulsing rhythm that matched your heartbeat. The engravings shimmered faintly as though molten beneath the surface. The warmth spread through the chamber, climbing up the walls and into the air, until even the shadows seemed to waver. A crack formed along the seal's edge. A hairline split that widened slowly with a low groan of metal separating from stone. The sound reverberated through the chamber, shaking dust loose from the ceiling. The sunlight caught in the widening gap until it seemed the seal was filled with liquid fire. The air became almost too bright to look at. yet you could not turn away. The trembling grew stronger, the engravings distorting as the seal tore apart piece by piece. Each fragment curled upward before falling to the floor, vanishing into dust before they landed. When the final section broke free, a rush of warm air flooded the chamber, carrying with it a scent of open fields and something unnameable that felt like home. The light in the center grew sharper, more focused, as though it were no longer just sunlight, but a path. The path of light from the shattered seal spilled into a narrow opening on the far side of the chamber. A faint draft met you there, warm and steady, unlike the stale stillness of the corridor behind. As you stepped through the opening, the air shifted again, carrying with it the sense of something vast and alive, waiting in the dark ahead. The hallway beyond was silent, but not empty. The walls were smoother here, their surface faintly reflective, as if holding the memory of faces that had passed through long before your time. The floor seemed to respond to your steps, a soft vibration rippling outward each time your foot touched down. It felt less like walking through stone and more like moving through the inside of a breath. Halfway down the hall, you stopped without knowing why. The air thickened around you, and the silence deepened until it felt almost physical. Then it came, a slow inhale, not from your lungs, but from the space itself. The sound was low and resonant, filling every inch of the hallway until the walls seemed to bend inward. It was not the breath of a person, not exactly. It was older, broader, as though the entire structure was drawing air into itself, preparing for something. The exhale followed softer but no less powerful, carrying with it a faint shimmer in the air like heat rising from stone. The walls seemed to ripple, and in that distortion you caught glimpses of shapes moving far beyond their surface, shadows that did not match your own. You closed your eyes for a moment, letting the rhythm of the breath sink into you. Each inhale pulled you forward. Each exhale held you steady. There was no fear here, only the sense of being measured, weighed not in judgment, but in recognition, as if the hallway itself had been waiting to know you. When you opened your eyes, the light from the chamber was gone, replaced by a dim glow ahead, barely visible yet steady. The breath continued, slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat turned to air. The vibration under your feet grew stronger, leading you onward until the end of the hallway revealed itself, not as a wall, but as another door, taller and narrower than the last. Its surface shimmered faintly, as if it too was breathing with the hall behind you. The tall, narrow door stood before you, its surface a muted silver that seemed to shift with the smallest change of light. Every movement in the air reflected across it in ripples, like water disturbed by a pebble. You stepped closer, and the ripples settled until the surface became clear enough to show your reflection. Yet the image staring back at you did not move when you did. The reflection's eyes were steady, calm, unblinking. It felt like it was studying you rather than mirroring you. The longer you looked, the more it felt alive. The silver shimmered faintly, and shapes began to appear behind your reflection. Vague at first, then sharper figures, standing in a space you could not yet see. One stood at the center, a presence that radiated light without a source. You could not see the face clearly, but the outline carried a weight that pressed into your chest, reminding you of the words, "I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture." The verse moved through your mind like a current, pulling you forward. Your hand rose without thought, the tips of your fingers hovering over the surface. The silver felt warm, though you had not yet touched it. The warmth spread into your palm, as if the door itself reached toward you. The reflection leaned closer, though your body had not moved, its eyes holding yours with quiet insistence. A faint hum rose from within the frame, deep and resonant. A thin crack of light formed where the door met the floor, growing upward until it traced the full outline. The figures in the reflection began to shift, as though preparing to step forward into your space. The central presence remained still, its light intensifying until the silver surface blurred into brightness. The warmth became almost too much to bear, yet you could not pull away. Your foot moved toward the threshold, and the hum deepened, surrounding you, until it was all you could hear. The silver rippled one last time, before becoming perfectly still. The light within it pulsed once, twice, as though counting something unseen. Then, without a sound, the door began to draw inward, not swinging, not sliding, but folding, space itself toward you. The edge of what lay beyond brushed against your breath, and the unseen room waited.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.